All right, we're just going to give folks a minute or two to settle in. Hi, Kevonne, how are you today?
I'm good, Wendy. How are you?
Good, it's good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
How's the weather in Philadelphia?
It's actually not too bad. I think, in the 50s.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's pretty mild here in Massachusetts as well, although not quite that mild. It always surprised me how, you just go a little bit further south to someplace like Philadelphia, and it does make a big difference.
It does. I
Yeah.
just flew in from North Carolina where it was 70, so 50s
Yeah.
is a little
Yeah.
chilly.
A little bit of a hit. Is
A little bit
70
of a hit.
normal for North Carolina in the spring or the
It
winter?
can be, absolutely.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
weather there is just gorgeous.
Oh, it sounds nice. All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started. We've got a few people filtering in, and I know they'll continue to join as the conversation progresses. So, welcome, Kevonne. I'm really excited that you are here today.
Well, thank you, Wendy. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. So, just a word about all things change. So, this is a conversation with women in leadership about leading in today's changing world. And each month, with a guest, I cover a range of topics that I think are relevant for effective leadership in this world of constant change. And the month of February is all about level up your career. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on for this final session in the month of February. And I'm really excited to have Kevonne Holloway here as my guest. So Kevonne is the Managing Director of Global Content Partners at Elsevier, has had a career in leadership at Elsevier and beyond in finance. And so really interesting to have this conversation with Kevonne today, specifically about breaking through your comfort zone in light of her, pretty significant career shifts. So I'm really looking forward to Kevonne's comments on that. She has a master's in business administration, as well as all of her hands-on experience and leadership experience. So again, Kevonne, welcome.
Thank you, Wendy.
And I just want to say for folks joining that if you'd like to say hello in the chat, if you know Kevonne or you know me, you want to say hi, if you have any questions or feedback, reactions, feel free to pop it in the chat, and we'll cover it as we go. So Kevonne, when you hear just breakthrough comfort zone, like what comes to your mind?
The first thing that comes to my mind is really breaking outside of a box and getting into a zone where you're not quite sure, not quite comfortable, but that's where you grow.
Yeah. Yeah. And so where have you experienced that in your career the most, do you think?
I think for me, when I transitioned from finance into content, which is on the business side of the organization at Elsevier, that's where I experienced the most change and breaking out of that box, out of that silo of comfort. I was in finance for over 14 years and practiced finance in a number of different organizations prior to coming to Elsevier. So Johnson & Johnson, for example, Pharmacia. And then when I transitioned to Elsevier, I came in through the finance organization as a business controller. About 2 years into that opportunity, another opportunity was presented itself in the content organization. They were looking for someone that had heavy analytical skills, and coming from finance, I felt like that was a good fit, but wasn't quite sure whether or not I wanted to leave finance to move to the business side of the organization, because there wasn't necessarily a clear path back to finance. So I had to really think about my comfort zone, which was finance. That's all I had known for 14 years. And thinking about whether or not I was ready to break out of that box. And it turned out that breaking out of that box was the best thing for my career.
But probably a difficult decision in a lot of ways.
It was a very difficult decision. I'm very faith-based, so I spent a lot of time praying about it, but also reflecting on the what ifs. So in true finance fashion, you break out a spreadsheet, you do a T-chart and say, okay, what are the pros and cons of leaving finance and moving on, or staying in finance and not taking a risk on myself and this new opportunity.
Mm. And when you did that pros and cons list, where did that lead?
It led me to breaking outside of my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that if I wanted to truly grow as a professional and in my career, I needed to step outside of that comfort zone, which was at the time finance.
Yeah. Yeah. I talk a lot with my clients about, making big career decisions and the pros and cons of pros and cons lists. I think sometimes that's a tool that we get comfortable with. And then when it comes to a big decision like this, it somehow doesn't quite like get us over the finish line. And there's a gap that we just sort of need to jump beyond. So I was just curious to hear about that. If it did you find that the pros and cons list really did the trick, or was there kind of a little bit more that needed to be covered to get you out of that comfort zone?
There was definitely a leap. I had to take a leap of faith, and that faith was in myself. And
Yeah.
I think, honestly, as women, we tend to be a little more reserved in our position about our capabilities and our abilities and what we can bring to the table,
Mm-hmm.
especially when we're thinking about our next career step, the move in our journey. And I really had to come to grips with that. And that's when I decided to take the leap of faith.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Really powerful. So what do you think about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable?
It's now a mantra that I
Yeah.
follow
Mm.
because change is constant, right? It's constant all around us in our personal lives, in our professional lives, and everywhere in between, where we kind of meld things together. And in order to be, you don't want to be stagnant. And when you find yourself becoming stagnant, you get comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so to really embrace change and be adaptable and be fluid means that you're going to be uncomfortable the majority of the time.
Mm.
So I realize that when I'm not comfortable with something, that's a good thing. It can be a good thing versus always trying to stay comfortable. Now, that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that I don't relax in a comfortable space, because you do need to take those steps back to re-energize yourself.
Mm.
But it's really important to want to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree that especially in today's changing world, that when if we're always looking for precedent and what's worked for us in the past to inform what we're doing in the future, it just doesn't serve anymore because the world changes so quickly. And so, yeah, just accepting that space where we're a little uncomfortable at all times almost, and finding that way to recharge so that we can then step back out to be uncomfortable again is really key to just success and thriving in what can be otherwise a pretty stressful world and stressful experience.
Absolutely. I will give you a great example of being uncomfortable. So, when I took on my new role at Elsevier as managing director for the Global Content Partners, part of the role was to relocate to Philadelphia from St. Louis, Missouri, in the middle of a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Very uncomfortable feeling. Very
Yes,
uncomfortable feeling.
I can
Um,
imagine.
but it was something, you rise to the challenge, and you'd be surprised at how you can rally yourself and rise to a challenge and become comfortable in the uncomfortable.
Mm. What was most uncomfortable about that prospect?
The most uncomfortable part about relocating was probably the circumstances under which I was relocating, which is the pandemic. It's the not knowing, the inventory on the market, the changes in the market, trying to get relocated, start a new job, figure out a new city, make new friends, find new circles, find an outlet to kind of escape to so I could be comfortable in one place, because you're not really comfortable in your new home yet until it becomes a home.
Mm.
So there's a lot of change that happens, and we all know that moving is one of the most stressful events that someone can go through, as is starting a new role or job.
Yeah.
Marriage is also on the list, so it's a big change.
Yeah. Yeah, and so often for many people, those job changes and physical relocation changes happen together,
Yes.
and when family is involved in that, then that's another dynamic that needs to be navigated. So you mentioned that faith has played a big part for you, and I wonder if you'd like to share a little bit more about that, and maybe for people who may or may not, feel like faith is a big part of their lives, what translates to help other people with that.
So for me, when I think about my faith, it's really steeped in recognizing a greater power
Mm-hmm.
beyond myself, but something that connects me to others in a very humbling way.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talk about the use of prayer, when I transitioned from finance to content, I believe in the power of prayer,
Mm-hmm.
and seeking guidance and enlightenment from that greater power is really what it distills down to.
Mm.
And so I spend a lot of time not only praying about the transition and what it potentially could look like and how it would impact my life and my career moving forward, but also spend a lot of time seeking counsel from others who were in different points in their career,
Mm-hmm.
through networking, but also seeking advice from like mentors. I spoke to people who were in content to get a better understanding of the area. I spoke to people who were in finance who had transitioned away from finance and hadn't necessarily found a route back, or had found a route back to finance. So I
Mm.
did a lot of due diligence, almost research, if you will, to marry with my prayers, so that I was making a more calculated decision. But ultimately, it came down to taking that leap of faith.
Yeah. Yeah, faith can have such a huge influence in people's lives and their decision making. And what I'm also hearing is that a lot of what that faith brought for you was that sense of connection and
Mhm.
that sense of humbleness. And I think that for those who maybe don't share that experience, that connection with other people is a great place to start those explorations, and to really tease out what next steps could look like. What is my comfort zone? Where can I get support when I'm outside of it? So I think that's a great point to share with our audience as well. So um, let's talk a little bit more about that exploration stage, and working with your network uh, to to manage that stage. Tell me what that was like for you.
So when this role in content first presented itself, it presented itself through a colleague who I had networked with, and worked with in finance. And she mentioned to me that there was an opportunity in content. They were looking for someone that had a lot of strong analytical skills and a background, that fit people in finance in particular. So from there, I then reached out to the hiring manager to do just an informational session, not really an interview, but I just wanted to get more information about the position. And I think people don't take enough advantage of informational conversations. Informational conversations can be key to not only networking and getting to know other areas, but it's key to understanding how you connect in a bigger ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started networking with people in content, started networking with people in finance to just kind of understand their journey. And one thing that people love to do is talk about themselves.
Yep.
And so I heard a lot of great encouraging stories, and I learned from some of the mistakes that they shared with me as well. And
Mm,
that was key to helping me make my decision as to whether or not I would be willing to take a chance on myself. That
mm,
was really what I was ultimately doing by making this change and applying for the role in content, right? It wasn't There was no clear path back, as I mentioned, to finance. So by stepping into this role, I wouldn't be able to turn around and do a 180 and come back to finance comfortably.
yeah.
And so it was something that I had to decide, is this something that I want to stick with, at least for the time being, to see where it takes me.
Mm, mm.
And that was a very uncomfortable feeling because for those who know me personally, I am a serious planner. I plan everything. I have spreadsheets for vacations. I plan everything to the T, even my workout schedule. And so,
Mhm.
and the different workouts that I do on any given night, it's all planned. So, um, not having working in a nebulous environment is very uncomfortable for me. But I've
Mhm.
gotten so used to putting myself in situations where I am uncomfortable that I've gotten better at it over time. So now I can work in a very ambiguous situation and be uncomfortable, but comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so it comes off as I'm portraying something as, oh, I'm comfortable in this space, when actually I'm really not.
Yes. Yeah, that's amazing. So the act of getting uncomfortable, it's like flexing a muscle, and you can get a little bit more comfortable in that space. And it makes me think of I think that occurs with athletes a lot, where the adrenaline starts, and where some of us who aren't accustomed to it might just like be like, oh, I can't. They use it, to fuel their race or their competition, whatever it may be. I just want to call out Stacy's comment. She says, I love the transparency that Kevonne shows, and the idea that decisions are not made in a silo. Prayer, advice, pros and cons lists, and internal retrospection all work together. So thanks for sharing that, Stacy. So well said. Um, Yeah, one thing, just with like just talking about using our networks for getting out of our comfort zone, I think it ties so well into just career exploration in general, and really casting a wide net and thinking broadly about where those networking conversations can lead. I had a conversation recently with a client who was feeling a little bit stuck. And we talked about just making outreach to people that she finds kind of fascinating, or she admires how they go about their work, and not even necessarily really having agenda. And she came back a couple weeks later, actually, with a pretty clear plan. And I think somehow, even just like opening things up a little and seeing where they go can have a very inspiring result. um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Networking is very valuable on a number of different levels. But what I found personally the most gratifying part of networking is getting to know someone else's experience and story and being able to learn from it.
mhm. And yet, so many people either struggle because they find it awkward, or they just feel like they don't have the time. And so, what would you say to people who have a hard time getting to that networking?
So I am actually, I'm going to share a little secret about myself. I'm actually an introvert,
Mm-hmm.
an extreme introvert. But at work, I'm an extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm an extrovert because I believe in networking to the extreme. So I like to get to know people in various departments. various areas, functions, to learn about what they're doing, but also to understand what the world has to offer from a career perspective. It's hard to, as I mentioned, I'm a planner. And so I like to have a general understanding of where I'm moving and where I'm going to, where I'm headed. And I believe in taking ownership for my own career path. And as a result of that, networking has helped me understand where I would like to go, where I would like to be, and what I want to be when I grow up.
Let us know when you do.
I will certainly do that.
You don't really seem fully matured yet.
I still have a few years to go.
You know, it's funny. I think it's actually quite common as we get older to become a little bit more introverted. I mean, I can relate. I've always been an introvert, I think, and I wouldn't say I'm an extrovert in any context, really. But I think, you know, I hear mostly from introverts, like, yeah, I really consider myself an introvert, and yet it is possible for introverts to successfully network. And I think, yeah, there are a couple of tips in there in what you're saying, and I would sort of add to that, you know, if you're an introvert and you are trying to get over that hump, you know, one, this is a great way to just practice that uncomfortable muscle, like be like, okay, it's a little uncomfortable, but I know I'm gonna survive it. It's not literally going to kill me. And also, as a, you know, sometimes if we think about, you know, how can I help them? What can I offer? Then that can help the average introvert feel a little bit more comfortable with networking. You know, when we're on a career search, it's maybe a little bit different, but that can help. And if you're doing it really exclusively at this stage for the purposes of that career search, you can remember how much other people love to help.
Yes.
Right?
Just asking people about themselves, really. As I mentioned earlier, everyone loves to talk about themselves and to share their experiences, which is great. Yeah. It creates community and a sense of belonging. And so for me, when I first started networking, it was putting myself in situations where I could network, going to group meetings and then following up with people afterwards, one-on-one, which felt more comfortable than addressing people in large groups or even in small groups. When I first started in the networking scene, I would follow up, get their card and their information and follow up with them one-on-one afterwards, and just set up. At that time, people used to, I'm dating myself here a little bit, but would meet for coffee and talk about their careers and their experiences. Now it's a Zoom call or FaceTime, but very different.
You know what I love about that approach, though, is the follow-up one-to-one is, one, it makes it more comfortable for those of us who maybe are a little introverted. But I also think it just really reflects a thoughtfulness, you know, that, you know, if you're the recipient of that follow-up, it's like, oh, what I said really stuck with this person. Oh, you know, maybe I can help this person. And just really shows that you were listening and paying attention, and it's not just like in the moment of like, oh, I have a question, you know, let me let me show everybody how I have a question.
Absolutely, which is a very awkward feeling as an introvert.
Yeah, exactly. And let's talk about that shift to remote and Zoom, and that being much more prevalent. That's another obstacle I've heard people share, that, you know, they experience it as an obstacle, that like, well, you know, I want to network more, but, you know, I just feel weird about doing that over Zoom. What are your thoughts about that?
So for me, I have been using Zoom to do a lot of networking, given the pandemic. But what I will say is it takes away from the personal approach. And sometimes when that's missing, it's hard to really connect with people.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are tips and tricks for connecting with people online It's almost like when you start a conversation, you start off with, "Hi, how was your day?" And then you get into talking about the person's family, something that's personal to them, so that you can connect with them on a personal level, and then you get to business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just navigate that conversation kind of similarly to how you would do it in person, but maybe we need a little more thought around that on Zoom because it's not like our natural habitat. It's just like abruptly the thing turns on and abruptly there we are, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think what I've observed is that I think we're at a point of no return here with Zoom. That and the impact that's going to have on our lives and networking, and as much as it may feel a little bit suboptimal or slightly awkward to initiate it. I think it's kind of expected at this point. I've certainly had multiple coffee, just networking conversations over the past year or two, and I think no one's really going to like blink an eye at that sort of prompting these days. But
Well, the good side of Zoom is now you can expand your network beyond location, right? And
mm,
geography. So
yes,
now I can network easily with people in Europe or Asia Pacific
hmm,
or even on the West Coast,
yep,
very easily versus trying to find a central location where we can meet if you just happen to be in the United States where we can
right,
meet for coffee.
yeah.
So Zoom has become a good tool for that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be like everything's pent up waiting for that in-person opportunity either. So that's a benefit. So we have just a few minutes left, Kavan, and I love just to round out for our audience today around some of the key takeaways. And so, I'm hearing a few things that are really valuable nuggets, I think, around this conversation with you. That breaking out of your comfort zone is critical, really, to finding that next big move potentially, but that getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is totally possible. There's this muscle that we can work around being uncomfortable and just existing in that space without it killing us. And also the importance of, a multitude of points of input. So your spirituality, connection with other people, that list making, like all of that just like really can inform like how and when to push us out of our comfort zones. What else would you like to add as takeaways?
I think the other thing that I would add is and it's actually a challenge. I would challenge yourself to think, am I comfortable today? And what can I do to make myself uncomfortable? Because I really believe that growth comes from being in uncomfortable situations. You grow more, you learn more when you're uncomfortable and have to figure things out and adapt and adjust to be fluid and agile. And so every day I get up and I try to do my best to ensure that I'm not being too comfortable in my skin or in my space, and
Mm-hmm.
that I find a way to balance it with what I'm trying to achieve.
Oh, that's so great. The gauntlet has been thrown down, people. You've been challenged to get uncomfortable. And I'm going to take that challenge. I'm pretty much uncomfortable every day these days. So I'm right there with you, but I'm going to find something that takes me just like a little bit further. I'm going to let you know how it goes.
Please do.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today here. Just a couple of announcements before I wrap up. So, from a coaching perspective, if this topic interests you, if you'd like a little bit of extra support, you can learn more about me and my service at wendyholtmark.com. And also want to let folks know that I'm leading a group program called Lead for Lasting Impact. It starts February 28th. Registration is now open, and you can learn more about that on my website as well. So thank you so much again, Kevonne, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks, Wendy.
Okay.